everyone. Wow, welcome to the Politico Speakeasy here at the GlobeSec Forum. What a crowd. Thank you guys for being here. Applause, I appreciate that. Hi. I'm Christina Gonzalez. I'm the executive producer of Politico's events for Europe, and our next guest needs no introduction. We have the president of the Czech Republic, Petr Pavel. He will be in conversation with my colleague, Anne McElvoy, our executive editor for Politico, so please give them a warm round of applause. Thank you.
And I thought you just came for me. It turns out that it's like, yeah, I hired that guy. But you know, being on stage with the main player on the home team never harms. So you know, Petr Pavel, President of Czechia, welcome to the conversation here with us in the Speakeasy from Politico and GlobeSec. So just to dive into this very rich content that we've been discussing here over the last 2 days, which is a lot of what I'm sure preoccupies you day in, day out. And in your opening, you talked about Europe grappling with how to strengthen resilience, to boost technological sovereignty. You were quite forward-looking, but you were also a strong defense expert in your own right over many decades and in your work with NATO and beyond. Do you believe that we are now, as we meet here in Prague, in a period where the continuing threats and the fallout we just heard about in the last session there about the stray drones getting too close for comfort in the Baltic states, obviously with Russia steering that in the background, that we are at a particular moment of danger?
Well, there is no doubt that the risk of conflict is greater than any time before since the Second World War. Russia is now not succeeding in Ukraine, but still has a potential to disrupt, provoke, and do actions within what we call hybrid activities. And that has always a risk of spreading into bigger conflict when provocation is responded by proper means and then used as a precursor for further conflict. We may become part of conflict very quickly. So I wouldn't underestimate it, but I wouldn't also say that we are at the brink of conflict.
And how are you assessing the other big sort of background rumbling story, I think, that has unnerved a lot of allies of Ukraine and proponents of the kind of stronger European security that you were advocating, Mr. President? Is this sort of on-off US position on troop deployments, the threat to withdraw 5,000 the armed forces there from Germany, and then a sort of equal threat to do something similar in Poland on the rotation of forces, but that seemed to be reversed yesterday by President Trump. That particular angle, knowing, as you know, the importance and the interleaving roles of the armed forces within the NATO construct and defense of Europe, does this concern you?
Well, what concerns me is uncertainty, unpredictability that we now see even within NATO. We used to be informed by allies about any changes in numbers and presence. The decision to deploy additional troops to Poland was announced apparently without any coordination with NATO. And it's strange when you realize that Supreme Allied Commander in Europe is an American four-star, and he's supposed to run all defensive operations in Europe, and suddenly he was probably not informed about having 5 more troops on his area of responsibility. But I believe that we will manage these issues within standard procedures in NATO. But
can I just ask you to throw in a question? Do you believe then that President Trump was being disrespectful to this, in essence, to his own top NATO general, the US general?
Well, I don't have any detail about their internal communication. It's probable that he was informed, But official information is that that was a decision that was not expected. I believe that within NATO we have procedures that are well established over decades, which are always leading to good coordination so that we use our resources in a very efficient way. And with regard to potential further withdrawals of US troops or capabilities from Europe, they were announced repeatedly. I believe that we have to take it seriously, and I would only argue that it is necessary to coordinate with our American allies a detailed plan of that intended withdrawal, not only in number of troops, but especially in what we call strategic enablers, such as airlift, intelligence, logistics, communications, which are the capabilities that are now mostly provided by the United States. But European countries are able to come up with a substitute to these enablers, but it will obviously take some time. And I believe that it is in the interest of both United States and European allies to do it in a coordinated way.
Is the Czech Republic itself pulling its weight in NATO? Prime Minister Babiš has cut defence spending to around 1.8%, I think, of GDP this year. Well, that's sizably under the 2% NATO target. A lot of countries are talking about going further, faster than that in the circumstances. And the alliance itself has said it's ramping up defence spending with a 2035 target. So tell me what you think about the Czech position.
Well, a Czech position is now being formed. Prime Minister Babiš expressed his will to present the approach of his government to defense spending and to meeting our allied commitments in Ankara. I believe that he should be given the chance, and we'll see what will be a final position of the government. Up to now, what I heard, and the position was developing, that the government is committed to spending at minimum 2%, that they are committed to meet targets agreed in The Hague last year, and also other commitments with regard to capability targets. So verbally, we are very much aligned, and we will see what will be the actions.
Sorry, just to be clear, that so you think that that story that talked about 1.8% of GDP was actually on the lower side of expectations. Are you expecting the Prime Minister to commit formally to a 2% target?
Well, I heard two statements. One confirming that his government would spend on core military expenditures 2%, and the other that he doesn't intend to do so, but I don't want to guess which one will be the final one. But from what I heard, the government is committed to spend 2% on military requirements, not only on those that are related to defense, such as infrastructure and so on.
Would you think it would leave Czechia exposed to danger if that number did fall beneath the 2% level?
Clearly, yes, because if we spend less than 2%, if we don't follow the trajectory growing towards more than 2%, up to 3.5 within a decade, and hopefully even earlier, we will not be able to meet our capability targets, which translated into human language means that our military will not be combat ready. And as such, it will not be able to protect our own citizens. That's an easy argument. We are not spending money to make anyone happy. Even in Brussels or Washington, we have to spend this money to make our military combat ready to protect our citizens if necessary.
Is that a persuasion that you've tried to undertake with Prime Minister Babiš yourself?
We had a number of meetings, and I believe that we will continue in very practical communication I do have some background in defense issues, and I would use it to explain it. Yeah.
I think it's your career fan club might be in the room tonight. You're also having something of a standoff with the Prime Minister over who represents Prague at the Ankara summit upcoming in July that you mentioned. Now, you've attended all annual NATO summits since taking office in 2023. As you say, you have a long history there with the organisation. At the moment, it appears that you're not intended to be part of the government delegation. Can you give us an update?
Well, we will have a decision made by the government on the composition of delegation and hopefully even mandate by the 8th of June. And before that, it's just speculation to say who will go. In my view, the decision could be a compromise, which I offered to Prime Minister, and not to compromise constitutional duties of a president to represent a country abroad, and at the same time the habit that we have here in the Division of Labor for 3 decades, where President used to represent a country at NATO summits and the UN General Assembly, and Prime Minister at all events related to European Union. There is no reason why to change this rule, and that's why I have to protect the position of a president because constitutional duties are not optional. It's my obligation, it's my job to do. That's why.
So this is a stand and fight issue for you?
Well, not necessarily standard fight. I think it's so far lack of ability to come to an agreement, but I hope that we will come to an agreement.
And how would you go about persuading the Prime Minister on that score? I think you have to wait till early June for the government to decide the official delegation. If you were excluded, you would have the option to go to court, as you say, because it is a constitutional matter. Is that what you would intend to do if you were excluded?
Our constitution is not specific who would go where, and it's right. Constitution expects that 4 main constitutional figures will be in a position to agree, and we had such an agreement for more than 3 decades. And whenever there is any change, I would expect that these people would come and agree on a compromise. What I saw so far was just one position against the other position. There was no compromise offered by the government so far. I have come with a compromise. I hope that it will be understood and accepted.
But you wouldn't rule out legal action if it came to an impasse?
I believe it will be necessary because it is to protect the Constitution. I cannot allow a reduction of constitutional powers of a president because whoever would succeed me would probably not be happy that I have reduced his room of maneuver. That's
always a good argument for those who come after. I read that you have even offered to cover the costs of attending the NATO summit. Is that the case? Politico said it must be true.
Which cost do you mean?
The costs, I suppose, the costs incurred of attending the NATO summit that you would offer in some way, perhaps as part of a compromise that could be possibly more appealing to Prime Minister Pavel. That you would cover costs. That costs would be allocated in a different way.
I think it's just a marginal issue, and we'll be able to resolve it.
I mean, the polling is quite divided on this, which I guess speaks a bit to a broader picture of politics in Czechia. 57% of Czechs would prefer Prime Minister Babiš to represent their country at the summit. 47% on your team. Does that matter? You know what public opinion says, or are we going a bit too guided by opinion polls?
With all due respect to public opinion, I believe that quite a big part of the population is not well informed. And it's because they simply believe that if the government is responsible for setting and pursuing foreign and defense policy, then it's the only actor in that game. Foreign and security policy is a shared responsibility, and all constitutional institutions are taking part in that big game. Biggest part is obviously with government, but President plays its role, but also both chambers of Parliament play their role, especially in parliamentary foreign policy. And I believe that this constitutional setup should be respected.
It's Johnny, for me coming back to Prague. I mentioned to you as we were coming on, I was here in the Velvet Revolution and the years that followed, and then also when things became, it just seemed to be a bit of your many wonderful local specialties, but this sort of tension between the presidency and the executive power, the prime minister. It arose, of course, between Václav Havel and his prime minister Klaus. Do you have a bit of a feeling that this is history repeating itself in your relations with Prime Minister Pavel?
It seems that our nation has some difficulties with authorities, and
it sounds like the beginning of a sort of Czech, a Czech joke that's going to have a punchline. How is it working out at the moment in your personal relationships with Andrej Babiš?
We are obviously a parliamentary system, but the role of a president is defined by constitution. There are occasionally some attempts to change this ratio of power, and after we introduced a direct vote for president without changing his powers within constitution, there is a little mismatch between expectations, what president should or could do, and his real powers defined by constitution. I was voted by people. I got 3,360,000 votes, which seems to be quite a strong mandate, but obviously that mandate is not reflected within constitution. I respect it. I try to stick to all powers as defined by the constitution, but I am not ready to withdraw from these powers.
You're both strong characters, aren't you? What are your personal relations like?
With the Prime Minister?
With the Prime Minister.
I would say realistic.
But good, huh?
It means there are ups and downs.
And this sentence is just getting shorter. I mean, isn't it? I mean, underlying it, if we looked at, let's draw out the camera, sort of probably tormented you enough about some little local difficulties. If we draw out the camera, are we seeing, in essence, if you look in this region, and if we look here in Czechia, or something of a kind of a tension that is just going to be very hard to resolve between people like yourselves and your supporters, pro-Western, think that NATO overall is a good thing, you can argue about spending, but fundamentally take that view that that is a security order. It should step up and stay there, stay behind Ukraine. It's absolutely essential to do so. And then we've seen a lot of trends, some waxing, some waning, of more populist approaches to foreign policy. Viktor Orbán in Hungary until recently was perhaps at the head of that. I don't want to make a direct comparison there because I think Andrej Babiš has got his, is only just getting into post and will have his own way of conducting things. But do you see that tension as being one that concerns you here and in Eastern and Central Europe as a whole?
There is a tension, and it's mainly caused by the fact that we live in a very luxurious situation, being surrounded only by allies and friends. And that's why many people don't see the urgency of threats and risks that are coming from war in Ukraine, from war in Middle East, or from other crises. We also witnessed steady economic growth, improvement of social standard within society. Unfortunately, that apparent and objective growth was not supported by growth of public confidence in our own situation. So people tend to believe that our situation is worse than it actually is. With regard to economic figures, social figures, and many other standards, we tend not to compare within Europe, and not even beyond, because if we do that, we would immediately understand that by many standards, we are, let's say, in first third of European EU countries. But quite a big part of population believes that we are probably the worst in the EU when it comes to social standards, to healthcare and educational system and economic performance, which is not true, but it's probably convenient for some politicians to maintain such a tension, because they can build their support on disappointment of people. I believe it is not responsible. It could be dangerous because we may live in a distorted reality.
You've had such a long period, as you referred to yourself, I mean, really 3 decades of being imbued with the values of post-89, post-1990s, the integration, the enlargement of the EU and the military expression of that, and NATO. I mean, have you been sort of disappointed in some ways to see where we have ended up, as you say, the return of kind of doubts about the Western liberal democratic order, the frustrations of populations? And to an extent, you know, I was sitting on stage with Anna Brnovich from Serbia, you will know well, the former Prime Minister and Speaker there, you know, who had particularly Serbian view, but, you know, she made her case strongly that it's not enough to just say, you know, we can't deal with Russia, you know, we have to just stay firm on the NATO agenda. Do you have some understanding of that there are players in the region who just think this Russia threat is so big, we don't necessarily trust NATO, we don't necessarily trust Western leaders, or Donald Trump indeed, to take us through it. We should deal more, you know, more amicably with Russia?
Well, I think there are some good reasons for countries that are not members of the EU or NATO to have some doubts about EU or NATO. But we also have a number of people within our own countries are members of NATO and EU for a long time, who are very uncertain and worried about the developments. We are now going through really big change. The whole world is in transformation. The old order slowly disappears, and the new one has no borders, no boundaries, and it's just turmoil which people observe, and it creates a lot of uncertainty and also a feeling of insecurity, and rightfully so. So I believe it is now proper time for all of us to focus on a very open and informal debate about where we are, where do we want to go, what do we have to do, because otherwise we'll be somehow lost in that boiling pot. It's now quite complicated to have such a debate even within the democratic family of countries, because such an open and informal debate is not really possible when the strongest member of this family doesn't want always to listen. But I'm confident that we will overcome that period, and we will be again able to identify main direction of our efforts.
I've been trying to end just on a question that people might just be curious about the person I'm talking to. I was thinking, what shall I ask President? I'll look back to your very impressive military record, and you've really done some tough stuff. You know, I think you've got a cupboard full of awards that you know, that make that pretty clear. What have you learned from your time in military life that you take every day, you know, into your routine? What you think is something we should maybe the military values that civilians can learn from in these troubled times?
My experience, but also experience of all those who were any time in war zone and saw people dying. I think before people start dying, it's still manageable. We shouldn't be paralyzed by stress from what is going on around, because things may be always worse. So let's not be frustrated with a lack of understanding, a lack of progress in a number of issues, because it's still well manageable. And I believe that before we start really fighting and dying, it's always time to be optimistic.
What a great note on which to end. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.